are actually involved in our activities on the continent. We've had commitments made by large American companies already interested in investing on the continent. So I think that's a positive thing. And to be frank, I'm not against the Chinese being involved. What you as Africans should want is reliable electricity.
Absolutely.
And I think the private sector working with the government, working with us in partnership, we're going to see this bear fruit for us. And you will see American companies involved.
Okay, let me ask you a very difficult question,
and
you will permit me to do this, because I was speaking with some of the captains of industry recently. I spoke with some chief executive, and they were saying that the Americans are very good. We've seen the results that they've delivered in their country, but when it comes to taking risk in Nigeria, not to mention the whole of Africa, that they're fairly averse to risk taken, and that's why you would find a lot of other countries like
I think
China
you're
and so on.
absolutely right, and we're trying to help mitigate some of that risk by providing insurance for American companies, but also providing encouragement and working with African governments to develop investment strategies that won't scare off companies from the United States. So it's going to be a three-pronged approach to encourage American investments. You have American companies who've been in Nigeria for many, many years. It does take a lot of patience. It takes a lot of creativity. And it requires a great deal of risk. But those companies who've taken the risk have seen the payoff. And I think we're going to see more American companies taking those risks.
That's good to know. If you don't mind, let's take a look at the trade. The trade between Nigeria seems to be dwindling. Will that be correct? Between Nigeria and the United States of America?
I think there are two parts to that question. In terms of oil imports into the United States, those numbers have gone down somewhat, but it hasn't affected the global numbers for Nigerian oil. We're producing a lot of oil ourselves.
Yes.
So, of course, we're going to buy our own oil first. But in terms of other investment areas, we're seeing those areas start to increase with Nigeria. And we're hoping that we can push the trade relationship between Nigeria and the United States to go beyond petroleum. To look at other areas of trade. And so part of AGOA is to work on that and to diversify our trade relationship with Nigeria. There are 1.5 million Nigerian-Americans in the United States. They are a huge part of that trade relationship that we have with Nigeria. We have large numbers of Nigerians going to the United States to trade. I think I saw a figure that our number of visitors from Nigeria had increased by about 45% over the past few years.
Sorry to break in, that does not seem to translate into commensurate amount of trade in terms of volume and in terms of numbers. When we look at the figures, it doesn't tell a good story, does it?
I disagree with you. I think the numbers are improving, and I think it's a positive trend that will see greater benefits in So I see the glass half full and filling.
Yes, I'm filling. Now, this is all well and good, Power Africa, Trade Africa, and developing young people for leadership roles in the future. But this is a reality which we cannot overlook. As embarrassing as it may sound, but we have to look at it and situate it in all of this. The issue of corruption in Nigeria. We must just talk about it and situate it. How is this affecting all the work that you plan to do to aid Nigeria? Aid in quotes.
Well, corruption is a problem. I said in a meeting I had in Abuja that Nigeria has many things to be proud of, and one of the things I can't imagine that Nigeria is proud of is the moniker of being one of the most corrupt states in Africa. And this is something that embarrasses, I think, all Nigerians I know. It is a cancer, and Nigeria is not the only country where this is a problem. We have it in the United States. We put people in jail regularly for corruption.
That's already a deterrent.
And it is a deterrent. And so we are working with the government of Nigeria. We have people from the Department of Justice who are advising in the EFCC to help work with that organization to build its capacity to deal with corruption. But in the final analysis, it requires political will to
Would you say
take
that is
on.
lacking at the moment?
I think, given the fact that corruption has been pervasive in Nigeria for so many years, I think additional political will is required to address the issue.
In essence, what we have in terms of political will currently is just not good enough. It's not.
It's not going to cut it.
It is not cutting it, and is not cutting it in many places in Africa, not just in Nigeria, and it is a deterrent to investments coming into this country. It is a deterrent to investments on the continent of Africa.
So if we want to take that one step further, what would you be saying to us in terms of communication between the President of Nigeria and President Barack Obama? What is he saying to our President to say in terms of the will to stop corruption in Nigeria? What's been the message?
It is a conversation that we've had with Nigeria for many years. That corruption is a blight on this country. It taints Nigeria's reputation, and Nigeria ought to be a African tiger in terms of economic growth, in terms of investment. This ought to be the focus of Africa in terms of the economy. And the one thing that's holding it back is corruption. And that's an issue that needs to be dealt with. And it is not something that we can deal with for Nigeria. Nigeria has to make the...
So how does the American government feel when you see on television or you hear that the President of Nigeria said that our biggest problem is that of infrastructure, not corruption?
I think the President has also recognized that corruption is a huge problem. And corruption
Huge or the biggest?
I don't know that it's the biggest.
Okay.
I know that it's big, and I know that it impacts on infrastructure. I know that there are people who want to invest, and they change their minds because they get pushed in a different direction because of corruption. I know that there are infrastructure projects that never get completed because of corruption. And Nigerians know it as well. And as I started out with, I've had many years of experience in Nigeria. I came to Nigeria the first time in 1978 when I was a young student before I came into the Foreign Service, and had studied Nigeria for years prior to that, and that was always an issue. And I always like to refer to the fact I'm from the state of Louisiana, and when I was in college in Louisiana, there was a book that was required reading for political science majors called The Politics of Corruption in Louisiana. So we've had the experience. We know that it is something that Nigeria is not the only place. It's something that still exists even in the United States.
Okay, so still looking at how corruption affects trade relations, Americans would look at their averseness to the issue of risk, and they look at the level of corruption, and they are aware that the government of America, if it finds that any American company is engaged in corruption outside of America, they will be brought to justice, even in America. Now, that being the issue, could that be a reason why some of them are definitely not too keen on doing business in Nigeria?
It certainly is a deterrent to American companies. Someone recently said to me that the only people going to jail for corruption in Nigeria are Americans. And American companies know that we have very strong laws that are enforced on corruption. And an American company faced with corruption or requests for payoffs are at an unfair disadvantage to companies that may come from other countries